This program airs statewide on California Public Television and is a California's Gold classic. This series is endorsed by the California Teachers Association, the California School Boards Association, and the California Library Association. Hi, I'm Huell. You know, one of the most interesting chapters in our state's history took place back during World War II. That's when hundreds of thousands of young men and women actually went through training in our state and then shipped overseas into actual battle. And of course, World War II is when our state's shipbuilding and aircraft building industries came into their own. There are lots of stories connecting California and World War II. And in this particular episode, we're going to take a closer look at two of those stories. Now, both of them are rather obscure. The first one takes place right here in the Long Beach Naval Shipyard. So if you're up for an adventure, as always, you're invited to join us as we continue our search together for California's gold. The Long Beach Naval Shipyard in Southern California is a busy place. All kinds of work being done on Navy ships of all sizes. But we didn't visit the shipyard to see a ship. We were there to see something larger than a ship, something very historic that dates all the way back to World War II. Gentlemen, we are standing out here on an honest-to-goodness piece of history. Could you explain to us exactly where we are and what the significance of this thing is?
Well, we're in Long Beach Naval Shipyard, Long Beach, California. This is the YD-171 is the official number for the crane.
The YD-171.
Right.
And let's take a look at this crane right now, because this is not just your ordinary run-of-the-mill crane, is it?
No, sir, it sure isn't.
How big is this thing?
Well, it's the barge is 110 foot wide and 208 foot long, and when the boom is boomed all the way up, it's 374 foot from the tip to the water.
So that's 374
feet.
Okay, now that we've got the statistics of this crane all figured out, what is it that makes this thing so important?
Well, the crane was utilized originally by the German Navy in World War II. It operated in the Baltic Sea and North Sea ports. It also operated in Copenhagen during the war. It was one of 4 sister cranes.
Built by the Germans?
Built by the Germans. One was built for the Russians at the time. And this one operated in Kiel, Bremerhaven, Hamburg, and Copenhagen. 2 of them today are still being utilized. This one in Long Beach, one in Leningrad, Russia. The 2 remaining cranes were both sunk after World War II, when the British attempted to tow one across the English Channel, and also when the French later tried to tow one across to France.
So the idea was that the Germans built 4 of these huge big cranes during World War II to build ships, to transport materials, to...
Yes, just in the same manner we've used it here in Long Beach, although the Germans used it at the end of the war to put U-boat sections together at Kiel. There was a big U-boat base there. Mm-hmm. Prior to that assignment, it also operated through various ports, wherever they had a heavy lift or a high lift that they could use in their construction of ships.
Now, how did this thing get to Long Beach from Germany?
It was moved here it was towed here with a ship.
Across the ocean?
Right, sir. And the boom and all of your structure you see up above was removed to make it so it wouldn't capsize.
Why did we decide to bring it over here instead of leaving it over there?
Well, all of the cranes were divided up. You call that war booty. And Americans just happened to get this one. Long Beach was short a heavy lift crane, and so it won out over the other shipyards who already had some heavy lift cranes in-house.
And as soon as it got here, it got its nickname, right?
Right. It's known fondly by the crew through the years as Herman the German.
Herman the German. So that's what we're here to look at today. And we're going to get the inside tour, right?
Right, sir. Anywhere you, the engine room all the way to the operator's cab, and we can go out on the boom if you like.
Well, can we take a look?
Sure.
Okay, let's go. We're going to go see Herman the German. And it's a big one, too. This is what you call a big German. Now we're going into the
Operator's cab.
operator's cab. This is where it all takes place in here. Now, this is all the original wood from the early 40s?
Well, right, This is original. This cab's never been changed from day one.
So the wood is original, the lights are original?
All your switches you see here.
And look over here, Louis. Look at this. This is the original German sign
That's a electricity. That's a safety sign, a warning sign telling you that that's electricity inside that box.
It's neat that all of this has been saved and not, you would think that maybe it would have been remodeled over the years.
Well, no, we've tried to maintain the originality of it. And it's basically the electrical part of it is still original. All your motors are original and everything, the ones that came with it.
Now, Bud, you've got an interesting story about the counterweight here. That's number one, that's a lot of weight back there.
Yeah, it's a 200-ton counterweight. And the structure that supports it's called a pendulum. During the war at Kiel, when the crane was being utilized to assemble U-boat parts, this was bombed several times. On one occasion, that entire pendulum was destroyed, and that weight dropped down through the deckhouse below here. And since it's in bombing range, they took the crane all the way over near Danzig, and it's in Poland today, to repair it to get away from the bombing raids. And so it had to travel a good distance just to repair this damage.
So this crane was bombed a lot during World War II by the Allies?
Yes, it received structural damage on several bombings. Some were severe. The stern area was bombed heavily, and they replaced the propulsion units with spares. And again, this counterweight was the other major damage. The others, when the crane was brought to the United States, they had to replace many of the small beams because they had shrapnel holes in them.
But through all the bombing, somehow or another, it never sank.
No, it never sank. You wanted to see some of the original German symbols. I'd like you to see the anchor over here. This is one of 5.
One of 5 anchors?
Right.
And this has the swastika on it.
That's right. It's the original Kriegsmarine. The M is also Navy. It means Marine.
The M stands for?
German Navy. Nazi Navy in this case.
And what is this number?
That's just the serial number of the anchor.
Wow. So there's a lot of this original kind of stuff engraved all over the...
Yes, many of the nameplates, although they put English subtitles next to it, just like a movie.
Now we're getting ready to go down through that little hole down to the
cruise quarters.
Now, what do you mean the cruise quarters?
Well, that's where the crew lived. This was just like a regular Navy ship. It was manned by a Navy crew. And they had 22 enlisted men and 4 officers on board all the time.
When the Germans were in control of it?
Right, when the Germans operated it. Yes, sir. It flew the German flag, just like our ships fly the American flag.
Right. Okay, let's go down and see what's down there.
All right, sir.
It's a little hole. You mean they all live down here?
Yes, sir.
Okay, this is pretty neat down here. This is
one of the officers' bunk room.
The officer's bunk room, and it looks...
His stateroom or whatever.
It looks exactly as it would have when he was here.
Right.
A little bit dustier, probably.
Right, yeah, with the janitorial's not too good.
Well, what have we got here? We've got the original...
That's his
the original bunk and his desk.
Right.
And what would this thing be over here?
It's kind of a settee or a couch or whatever for sitting on.
With the original leather. And
that's his wardrobe, or you know, his closet for his clothes.
So
also,
really,
he had storage here probably for his personal.
So this is just like it was.
Oh yeah, same, identical. You still have the old steam hot water heater. And his sink, of course, his cabinet.
Wow, that's
shaving,
amazing.
his mirror.
Boy, this is something. This is an amazing kind of a sense of history when you're down here. You feel like you're kind of, you're kind of like going back in time.
Yeah, well, you just wonder what happened all those years ago, say back in the 42 and 43.
Yeah.
When, you know, the activity that went on here.
Yeah.
Yeah.
keep seeing things. Fellas, you know, a lot of people, if you told them you were going out to do a story about an old crane, they wouldn't get very excited. But when you think about it, there's as much history here as there is in almost any ship you could visit.
That's true, yeah. The two countries, the Germans and also the U.S. It was very important to the German Navy, I'm sure, and it was been important to our Navy, the U.S. Navy.
Yeah, we just kind of picked up where the Germans left off.
That's for sure, yeah.
We worked on many World War II ships with this crane, you know, the Missouri, the New Jersey, the Queen Mary, it carried troops during World War II, so we worked on her with this. So it's pretty well related between the type of work it's done, both countries.
Yeah. It's one of those little known, you know, I mean, I guarantee you I could have come out here and driven by this thing 500 times, and if I hadn't known, I wouldn't have known.
That's for sure, yeah. There's probably people who drive over that Vincent Thomas Bridge every day that just says, oh, there sits another crane. You know, but yeah, there's history here. And not only that, it's been a workhorse over the years, too. And then again, it was home for 22 men and 4 officers for a few years, too. Although we never had people live aboard it, but they did. It was home to them. It was their home.
Well, it survived. That's the one thing you can say about that big old crane. It is a survivor.
Well, that's for darn sure. It's still going today, too. And it'll probably go for a few more years, too.
To reach our next destination, we headed north up Highway 101 to the unincorporated community of Goleta, which is just north of Santa Barbara on the Central Coast. Once in Goleta, we went to the Sandpiper Golf Course to meet up with our local welcoming committee. And then we all climbed aboard electric carts and headed out across this beautiful course for the beach. A beach where over 50 years ago, history was made in a big way. Now we've gotten off the golf carts and we're heading down to the beach. And Justin, this is where it all happened. This is where history was made back in 1942. Can you tell us exactly what happened here?
Yes, be glad to, but let's set the stage a little bit for what was here then. Things don't look the same today as they did then. This was one of the largest oil fields on the west coast of California in 1942. And right where we stand today is a nice empty beach, but in those days this was a forest of oil wells and piers.
All out here.
And it went out into the ocean several thousand feet, and there were many pumping derricks at the time, and the area was well known as one of the major oil fields on the west coast. There were buoys out here at the end of the piers, and at those buoys many tankers tied up from all over the world.
So this was a big oil shipping area.
Big oil shipping area. They shipped directly out of this area to the Japanese, to the Europeans, the Germans, to the South Americans. Anyone who wanted to buy the product, they could buy crude oil here or gasoline, refined gasoline. Up on the bluffs here were a lot more oil wells and storage tanks, and there were 2 major refineries. One was to the left of me here, which was a crude oil refinery, and the other one down the coast here was a gasoline refinery.
Okay, now that sets the stage.
That's right.
For what happened on that fateful evening. And what was the evening?
The evening was February 23rd, 1942.
Right after, just a couple of months after Pearl Harbor.
About 69 days after Pearl Harbor.
Okay, what happened?
And on that evening, about 7 p.m., it was still light at that time. They had double daylight savings time introduced right at the beginning of the war, and a Japanese submarine appeared over here to the east, where that ship is down there, and started moving along the coast slowly. And the sailors emerged out of the submarine and started loading the gun and pointing it towards the coast here, and then they started firing.
So a Japanese sub actually fired from right out here.
Right
How
out
far
there.
off the coast?
Approximately 2,500 feet off the coast and moving parallel to the coast. They fired about, as far as they can determine, 26 rounds totally, about 5.5-inch in diameter gun rounds. And
were they trying to hit the oil refinery? Is that it?
they were trying to hit the oil tanks, is what they're trying to hit. There are 4 large tanks sitting up on the bluffs over here, back about a half mile, and they were full of high-test gasoline. And they were trying to hit those tanks. They weren't very good at it, however.
They missed.
They missed, right.
So the Japanese were doing this to, you think, really to put a scare in America, or to actually strategically hit these tanks? Or a little of both?
I think their motives were both. They were trying to scare the American people, to let them know that the Japanese could come to the coast of the United States and attack us. And they brought the battle in the early days of the war right to the coast of the United States. And the Western Front was right here.
Along the Pacific coast, the hunt is on for the Jap submarine that brought the war to U.S. soil. Lying offshore, the Marauder opened up against oil refineries near the beach at Santa Barbara. Rigging and pumping equipment of one plant were shattered by a direct hit as the night raider fired 25 shells at the derricks. Aimed at those storage tanks, deck guns from only a mile offshore missed their marks. A piece of shell made in Tokyo. It did little harm, but it was the first fired in this war against our own shores. There's the crater of a 5-incher, nearly big enough to hide that Jeep, big enough for all America to see. The octopus of war embraces the world, war everywhere. In the Atlantic, the Pacific, the China Seas, the Indian Ocean, on all 5 continents. No American doubts now that this war is our war.
This was the first time since the War of 1812 with the British that the United States was attacked by a foreign power, and the only time we were attacked on the West Coast. The other attack, of course, occurred with the British on Washington in 1812.
So this was the first time the United States had been attacked by the mainland of the United States had been attacked by a foreign power since 1812.
Since 1812.
And Carlo was here. You were here that day.
Yeah, I was here.
Tell us what that was like to be here the day history was made when the Japanese attacked the mainland of the United States.
Well, at that time I was about 14 and a half years old, and the war had just been going a couple of months, since the 7th of December. We were huddled around our giant ever-ready radio at home, listening to one of President Roosevelt's fireside chats. And as Justin mentioned, why with the double daylight saving, why at 7 o'clock it was still in, there was a certain amount of light. And all of a sudden after the fireside, it was actually during the fireside chat. I don't know whether they timed it that way or whether it was just luck, but I heard this bang, and then another bang, and I ran outside, and we have a hillside right near our home, which is, we're in the foothills directly north and a little bit east of here, and you can see these flashes. And I didn't know there was 26 of them. I knew there were between 20 and 30 of them, and it gave me enough time to run up to the crest of this hill, and I sat there and I watched the flash of the submarine. Now, to be very honest with you, I could not see the submarine either because of the bank or because of the haze.
But you could see the flashes coming from out here.
Yes, yeah.
And it must have made a heck of a sound when
it made a big sound, and it went on for, like I say, it seemed a long time then. There was an interval in between each shell. I'm sure they had to load their deck guns or whatever they were shooting. If there was a 5-inch gun, I guess.
Well, what did the people of Goleta think when were you scared? Did you think this was an invasion? What? Well,
there's an amusing sidelight to that, because the next day the people were scared and there were no troops here and no one knew what happened. And all of a sudden, we had the formation of the Home Guard. Now, this almost sounds like something out of a movie. What was it? The Russians are coming, or whatever.
You defended Goleta.
Right. And we were down marching, and the only good thing about the whole thing was no one wounded each other, because everyone came with
the
the guns, and they were all loaded, you know? And they were every size and type of gun that you could possibly imagine.
Well, it turns out this amazing event had one more element to it. So next, we drove a couple of miles directly inland from the golf course to the Embarcadero Ranch to get the scoop firsthand. Now, Mrs. Pratt, you lived here on
Yes.
this ranch.
Yes, we had lived here for 7 years at that time, the night of the shelling.
Well, now tell me about the shelling, because you remember it. You have a story about it.
It was daylight savings time, and there was 2 hours difference, so it was still light at a little after 7 o'clock when the President Roosevelt was speaking. And I was out in my yard watering. My children were already in bed. And all of a sudden I heard this bang, bang, banging, and I thought it was an explosion down at the refinery, at the Barnesdale refinery. And all of a sudden something was coming at me, a whizzing sound that scared me to death, and I jumped.
What do you mean, a whizzing sound?
Well, what does a shell sound like when it's going? It's just a whistling sound, I would say, a whistling sound. And I got myself up on the porch, but before the shell came, it stopped. The sound stopped. And that undoubtedly was the shell that was found the next morning.
So there wasn't an explosion for that?
No, there
shell.
was no explosion. It was a dud.
Here is the shell. Now this is the shell.
This at that time was probably 250 to 300 feet from where our house actually was.
Wow. So your house was just right out here. So this just
in
came.
the area. Yeah.
Now, how did we get the shell?
Well, my father, who happened not to be here when this happened, was down south, and he was, of course, very interested in having it, but the military took it back to Aberdeen, Maryland, to study it. And he got to work right away and said he'd like to have it when they were through studying it. And it took, 2 or 3 years to get it back
from the military.
From the military, yes. And they sent it back finally, and we've had it ever since.
So this is like a family
souvenir. A family heirloom.
This is a real bit of history right here.
Sure it is.
Now that, this ought to be in the Smithsonian or something, instead of in front of your fireplace.
Mine? The Japanese gave it to us, didn't they? It's mine.
Yeah.
Well, Justin, it's a fascinating story, and, I love history, and I thought I knew history pretty well. I'd never heard of this before.
Yes, it is a somewhat obscure footnote to history, but it was a major event at the time, and it occurred right here in this looks to be a remote area at this point, but is the center of a large population area today.
It's interesting, there's just a little plaque on the golf course. That's it. Otherwise, everything is gone. The piers are gone. Most of the people are gone.
Most of the people are gone. It is the 50th year. We had the 50th anniversary celebration last year in February, and many of the people who are here are gone. And what you see today is pretty pristine looking, but it was a very active oil field at one time.
Well, it's interesting that it happened right here. You kind of wonder what it must have been like to look out, and there a Japanese sub surfaced, and the gun started blazing.
Yes, I think anybody who had a chance to stand here and watch it at the time would be astounded. And the young people today who come by here and hear the story have a hard time imagining what it actually happened.
Well, you probably had to be alive at the time to understand the way the country felt, this war mode, this war scare,
right.
that this was something that really brought it home.
Yes, this action was followed up by nationwide bond drives, and they were used the slogan "Avenge Ellwood" to raise funds. Avenge Ellwood to raise funds to fight the Second World War.
Wow!
So it was a very important part of our historic heritage in the Second World War and for the last 50 years.
Well, there you have it, two rather obscure stories connecting California with World War II. First, we went down to the Long Beach Naval Shipyard and climbed around on Herman the German. And we've ended up here on the beach in Ellwood on the Central Coast, where on that fateful night back in 1942, history boomed forth from a Japanese submarine right off the coast. And of course, these are just two of many stories connecting California with that fateful period in world history. Hope you've enjoyed this program, and as always, you're invited to come on along with us again next time as we all continue our search together for California's gold. Goodbye, everybody.
Buy, 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 buy a bond, and by, the bonds you buy'll bring you victory. Buy, 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 buy a bond, and you'll be standing by the victory arch when Johnny comes marching home again. Oh, you should need no request, for after all, you know that you're investing in the best. Till the lads come back again, back the old attack again. Buy, buy, bond. This is no time to say you've done enough. This is the time to really do your stuff. And even if you can't be a soldier in the ranks, you can be the guy to help supply the guns and planes and tanks. This is the time for you to do your best. This is no time for you to take a rest. The enemy is reeling and his morale is low. So now's the time to fall in line and deal the final blow. Buy, 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 buy a bond. Buy a bond. And by, the bonds you buy'll bring you victory. Buy, 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 buy a bond. Buy a bond. And you'll be standing by the victory arch when Johnny comes marching home again. Oh, you should need no request. Buy a bond. For after all, in the best, till the lads come back again, back the old attack again. Buy, buy, buy.
Well, hello everybody, I'm Huell Hauser, and I sure hope you enjoyed this adventure. If you'd like to see it again or share it with your family or friends, or perhaps donate a copy to your local school or library, it's available on video cassette and on DVD. All you have to do is call 1-800-266-5727, and we'll be glad to send it to you right away.